It is time now for our continuing series ahead of the 10-year anniversary tomorrow of the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines flight MH370. And today we head to the very heart of the story, Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, where we're joined live by the journalist Adam Hancock, who's reporting on this story. Adam, great to have you on the show. Let's start with the fact that there was already a memorial held last weekend. Tell us about that first.
Yes, that was took place here in Kuala Lumpur on Sunday, and it was a gathering of family and friends and other loved ones of people who were on board the plane. It's something that's pretty much happened most years around the time of March the 8th, which is the date when flight MH370 went missing. And it's an opportunity really for those family and friends to come together, reflect on what has happened, try and find some comfort in the presence of each other. But I was speaking this morning to a lady called Grace, who her mother was on the flight, and she is effectively the spokesperson for the families of the people on MH370. And she said it's all self-funded, it's all organised by the families. There's no input from the authorities here. And really, that will be about it in terms of tributes. We're not expecting anything tomorrow on March the 8th here in Kuala Lumpur. So that event on Sunday, the 10-year anniversary event, is probably about it, really.
Well, it's quite striking that you say this is all self-funded. I mean, what, in your sense, then, do the families think of the role that the Malaysian government plays in this?
Yeah, I think there is disappointment that more is not being done really to mark the occasion. And, you know, even there's no permanent memorial. I was asking this morning, is there anywhere where I could go and film, where there would be tributes left to people on the plane or even at the international airport here? But no, it's all taking it down. And actually, Grace was telling me that a lot of the materials that you might see at these events that you may have seen photos on in the media, for example, that they all end up at her house. She said her house is effectively a museum to a lot of the events that have taken place to remember. I think there is frustration still at the authorities here for what is perceived as a lack of work done to continue to find this plane. We had a new line at the weekend from the Transport Minister that there was an indication that the government would be willing to reopen the investigation. But I spoke to an expert who's followed this story for the last 10 years. I spoke to him yesterday, and he was telling me that this is something that regularly comes up around March the 8th, almost as if it's to appease the families and make them feel that something is being done. So whether or not those words will be followed up on is something definitely to watch in the coming weeks.
And what do the families think about then that in itself, the idea that the search might be reopened? I mean, would that kind of open an old wound for them? Have they been able to make any sort of peace with this situation, given also the way you're describing what the Malaysian government does here, kind of often suggesting that investigation might start again and then not following through?
I think certainly from the family members that I have spoken to, that there is a desire for the search to continue. I think that the majority would say they would prefer that rather than the potential pain it might cause. I think many of the family members have a feeling that, or a view that there is unfinished business when it comes to the search for this plane. Obviously, the wreckage has never been found, only a few small pieces of the plane that have washed up on remote beaches. So I think really there's a strong desire for the investigation to open, for new technology to be used. There's a marine robotics company in the US called Ocean Infinity. They have previously searched parts of the Indian Ocean for the plane, but once again, they have offered the Malaysian government effectively a no-find, no-fee deal to try and find the plane. So I think that the families, to get any sort of closure, really, and whilst they may be, dealing with the grief and coming to terms with the fact that they won't see their loved ones again, to get a complete closure, I think they really want to know what happened, or they really want to know where the wreckage ended up, and that might start to be able to allow investigators to piece together, what their loved ones, what their final hours look like.
Well, and Adam, we have been speaking to people here as well this week who believe that they have narrowed the location of the plane, but I do wonder how much that is reaching Malaysia. Is there a perception there among the families, experts, the government for that matter, that there is enough new evidence to launch another search?
Yeah, I think particularly amongst the families, they're obviously holding on to any sort of new evidence or any new theories that are taking place. Yesterday, I was speaking to an aviation expert who was saying that a British engineer has pinpointed an area around 1,500 kilometres off the coast of Perth, which hasn't been searched yet. And through amateur radio signals, he's pretty sure that he's picked up a flight path. So I think, understandably for the families, anybody who's coming forward with a theory or a new location, they're very keen for those areas to be searched. It's interesting that the Transport Minister did flag the possibility that the investigation, or the official investigation in Malaysia, could be reopened, because that may indicate that perhaps they think there are new leads that they could follow. I must add, though, that the Prime Minister in Malaysia, he was speaking at the ASEAN summit taking place in Melbourne this week. He kind of reined things in a little bit compared to what the Transport Minister said, more taking the approach that if there is credible evidence and new emerging evidence, then Malaysia would be willing to reopen the case, rather than the Transport Minister. He was a bit more forward in saying he was going to put a proposal to the Cabinet about reopening the case and getting on board with Ocean Infinity again.
And just finally, Adam, I mean, what would it mean, do you think, to these families if 10 years on the plane was actually found?
I think ultimately it would provide closure. I think it would allow them to be able to almost move on from this. Obviously, they're always going to have the pain, they're always going to have the grief, and they will always have the memories of their loved ones. But I think, like Grace was telling me this morning, it's still grief, whether or not a relative of yours dies of natural causes at the age of 90. It's grief all the same, and everyone is sharing that grief. But for them, just not knowing, having so much mystery, being angry and frustrated at some of the mistakes that were made early on, being frustrated at the investigation, for them, I think if the wreckage was found, was discovered, and the trail of the plane could be kind of pieced together, it would just allow them to kind of almost draw a line under this and just focus fully on remembering their loved one, rather than having to constantly read about theories and speculation and investigations potentially reopening and the emotional rollercoaster that brings.
Adam Hancock in Kuala Lumpur, thank you very much for joining us. And you can hear a full episode on the disappearance of MH370 tomorrow on the Monocle Weekly. You're with Monocle Radio.